Lord, you've probed me and you know me. You know when I sit and when I stand. You understand all of my thoughts from far away. You formed my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am wonderfully made. So welcome. This is the fifth short presentation YouTube that I'm offering for my parishioners and anybody wants to join. Parishioners of Pierre from Quebec, the parish of Jesus Light of the World. My name is Fr.Francis McKee and I'm a parish priest for many, many years. And since many people throughout the world are presently in quarantine or in isolation in their homes, and because this is a new experience for so many, very debilitating, they're confusing, I thought I would, as a pastor, just offer some brief reflections on how to live in this time of isolation, not as a time of death, but a time of life. The great spiritual writers say to us that when you're into the S blank blank T, right up to here, and there's nothing you can do about it, then stay there and learn and grow. And that's what I'm going to be encouraging you and me and all of us to do. Today's topic, I've talked about a number of things now, as you know. I've talked about the importance of routine. I've talked about mindfulness. I've talked about Lectio Divina and how to pray with the Bible and meet the Lord. Today's topic is loneliness. Loneliness. I noticed particularly among the young people, but also a lot of older people during this time of quarantine and isolation, loneliness can be a very frightening and scary thing because normally in life we're distracted by so many things that we're doing. So we forget about the lingering loneliness in us. When I'm not chosen for a sports team and they've divided up the teams and we'll take you, I take you, I take you, I take you, and the last one left is me. I feel lonely. When Valentines are offered, when I was a kid, we used to offer what's called little Valentines. I don't know if they still do it in the schools now, but people give each other Valentines. For Valentine's Day, and of course, some people got huge piles of Valentines, and of course, there were some times when I got no Valentines, and I thought, well, what about me? It's a wonderful tradition, but of course, the person gets left in the cold. It's not so easy. Or perhaps I'm sick and I'm staying at home and everybody's gone to school and to work and I feel all alone. It happens to the elderly, it happens to the young. You go to a party and everybody seems to be fitting in and people are laughing and having a good time and I'm sitting in my corner saying, gee, I feel like I should be having a good time, but why am I not fitting in here? And I leave wanting to have had a good moment of communion and sometimes I feel like I'm empty. And that gnawing sense of loneliness when we're in isolation during this pandemic and the little viruses forcing us all to stay in our homes can be a very frightening experience, especially for the young, the elderly who are living alone and who are not being visited, for example, or may not be able to be touched or visited by anybody. Loneliness can be a very difficult time. And I think that when we're not in quarantine, when we're not in isolation, the loneliness is still there, of course, but we're running away from it in all kinds of ways. Through video games, we have a cell phone. We can't sit down for 2 seconds without having to look at the iPhone. A wonderful tool, of course, but we can't stay for 2 seconds without phoning somebody or talking to somebody to make sure that I still exist Because when nobody's talking to me and I don't make any phone calls, I wonder whether I exist or not. I suspect that that's why so many people today are addicted to their phones and to their iPads, because our ability to be quiet in aloneness and solitude is a very difficult thing to do. And sometimes that hostility, in that loneliness, we can become hostile. Because the only way I can make myself feel like I exist is that I'm better than you, faster than you, better cook than you. And so I compare myself because I'm not at peace with who I am as a person. And the loneliness gnaws away. But loneliness is part of our condition as human beings. You were born alone. Of course, you were born from your mother, but you came out alone, and you entered this world alone, and at the end of your days, you will, surrounded by, no doubt, by people who love you, but nevertheless, you will have to die alone. And so there's something profoundly moving and existential about loneliness and aloneness that we either run away from, are terrified of, do everything we can through addictions or whatever it is by activity to run away from, or at some point mature and welcome and embrace my aloneness, my loneliness. And when I do that, something magnificent begins to happen. I experience in my loneliness when I take the time to look at it. And this is what I'd encourage you to do during this time of quarantine, when you feel that loneliness and you need somebody to fill in, and you feel like nobody cares, nobody's called you, and you have this urgent longing to call somebody, anybody, to embrace that loneliness and aloneness, that nakedness of my existence as a creature before the greatness of all. Tiny little speck of dust in the midst of this huge universe, all alone. And allow that to become the road which will teach me to encounter two individuals, my true self and the one who loves you more than you can ever imagine, the creator of the universe, who carries you in the palm of his hands. I have carved you in the palm of my hands, and even though a mother should forget her child, I will never forget you, says the Lord. It's in embracing my loneliness and staying there and accepting it and going through the terror of embracing it, that I can slowly move through growth in my prayer life, growth in my mindfulness, and especially aware of the tiny voice in my loneliness, that if you're listening carefully, if you're attentive to the movements, the sentire in your heart, you'll begin to hear this inaudible little voice, which we're always drowning out by all kinds of activity, that says, you are my precious child. I've given you life, and I breathe it into you, and I'm longing to be in a relationship with you. This still voice of the presence of the Lord speaks to us in our loneliness and reminds us that our life is a precious journey with many people, companions on the journey, but they are companions, and that ultimately with my own conscience and my own heart, I must make this journey on my own, holding arms with others, but ultimately having to embrace myself in all of my limitations, my talents, my abilities, and who I am as a person. and to receive that as a gift from God, not trying to crush the other or be better than you or faster than you, but embracing who I am in humility. And when I do that, when I recognize that I am a creature beloved of the Lord, and begin to accept myself in my limitations, my strengths, and as well my monsters, slowly I become free and become who I am before the Lord. And slowly my loneliness changes and transforms into solitude. Where before the loneliness was gnawing at me and killing me, and I want to kill you because I need you. But I move from my loneliness into accepting my solitude before creation, before the Lord. And when I do that, moving from loneliness to solitude, I move from hostility towards the world out of fear, hostility towards hospitality. When I've embraced my loneliness and accepted who God has made me to be, and embrace it in all of my humanity, and say, Lord, I am your child, I accept it from you, then grows a tremendous freedom. Freedom of the children of God, freedom to be able to serve you because I know now who I am. And I find my freedom in serving you and seeing how you might be and how you're doing in your life. And so as this true self of mine comes through, as I embrace my loneliness and don't run away from it, as terrifying as it can be, when I'm in the bus all alone and have nobody to talk to, and I'm tempted to take the phone just to say, Lord, no, let me embrace my loneliness and embrace who I am as your child, being to receive that as a gift from you. Then I begin to see the face of the Lord. And then my journey no longer becomes loneliness, but it becomes a solitude that I share with others in the walk towards the Father's home. And so the Lord bless you as you journey with this loneliness that we all feel. We all go through it. I think there's a pandemic, as a matter of fact, of loneliness in our modern culture. And maybe this time of aloneness and quarantine is the time that God gives us to kind of embrace it and mature, and become people who are more whole. God bless you. Courage. Embrace your loneliness. May you find in and through that the wonderful love of the Lord, for whom you are his most precious child. Peace be with you.